The blizzard had been howling for 3 days straight when Zara Abbott's stagecoach wheel cracked apart on the frozen trail 5 miles outside Miles City, Montana, leaving her stranded in a whiteout so thick she could barely see her own trembling hands. It was December 1882, and the temperature had plummeted so low that her breath crystallized instantly in the air, her lungs burning with each inhale as she stumbled away from the overturned coach, the driver already frozen solid in his seat, his eyes still open and staring at nothing. She had been traveling from St. Louis to meet her cousin who had promised her work at the general store, a chance to start fresh after her parents had died from typhoid fever 6 months earlier, leaving her with nothing but a small trunk of belongings and a heart heavy with grief. The wind screamed around her like a living thing, tearing at her wool coat and whipping her dark hair across her face as she pushed forward, knowing that to stop moving meant death in this frozen wasteland. Her fingers had gone numb inside her gloves, her feet like blocks of ice in her leather boots, and she could feel consciousness slipping away when she saw it through the swirling snow. A dark shape that might have been a building or might have been a hallucination. She forced herself toward it, falling twice in snowdrifts that came up to her waist, dragging herself up each time through sheer stubborn will, until her frozen fingers touched rough wooden planks, and she realized it was real, a cabin, and she pounded on the door with the last of her strength before collapsing against it. The door opened inward and she fell with it, landing hard on a wooden floor that felt impossibly warm against her frozen cheek. She heard a sharp intake of breath, then strong hands were lifting her, carrying her across the room, and a deep voice was saying something she could not quite make out through the roaring in her ears. She felt herself being lowered onto something soft, felt the weight of blankets being piled on top of her, and then everything went black. When she opened her eyes again, golden firelight was dancing across rough-hewn log walls, and she was lying in a narrow bed piled high with quilts and furs. Her wet clothes had been removed and replaced with a flannel nightshirt far too large for her, and her feet were wrapped in wool blankets. She tried to sit up, but her body would not obey, every muscle screaming in protest, and a quiet voice said from somewhere near the fire, "Best stay still. You got frostbite on 3 toes and both your hands. Could have been worse." She turned her head slowly and saw him for the first time. A tall man with broad shoulders and dark hair that fell almost to his collar, sitting in a wooden chair near the fireplace with his long legs stretched out before him. He wore a plain flannel shirt and worn denim pants, and his face was all hard angles and weathered lines, the face of someone who had spent his life outdoors. His eyes were an unusual shade of gray-blue, like winter sky just before dawn, and they watched her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Where am I?" she managed to whisper, her throat raw and painful. "My cabin, about 4 miles west of Miles City." His voice was low and rough, as if he did not use it often. "Found you on my doorstep 3 hours ago. Thought you were dead at first." "The driver," she said, and tears burned in her eyes. "He did not make it." The man nodded slowly. "Storm like this, nobody should have been out on the trail. Stagecoach company should have known better. I need to get to town. My cousin is expecting me. Not going anywhere for a while. Storm has not let up, and even if it did, you are in no condition to travel." He stood up in one fluid motion and moved to the stove, where a pot was simmering. "Need to get some warm food in you." She watched him ladle soup into a tin bowl, his movements economical and precise, no wasted motion. There was something almost military in the way he carried himself, a discipline that spoke of rigid self-control. He brought the bowl to her and helped her sit up, propping pillows behind her back, his hands gentle despite their obvious strength. "I am Zara Abbott," she said as he handed her the spoon. Her fingers could barely grip it, clumsy and stiff. He hesitated for just a moment, then said, "Adam Lawson." "Thank you for saving my life, Mr. Lawson." He gave a slight nod and returned to his chair, not looking at her. Anyone would have done the same. But she suspected that was not true, that there were plenty of men who would have left their door bolted against the storm, unwilling to take in a stranger. She sipped the soup slowly, feeling warmth spread through her chest, and studied him in the firelight. He had to be in his late 20s, perhaps 30, with calloused hands and a scar that ran from his left eyebrow into his hairline. Everything about the cabin spoke of a solitary life. One chair, one set of dishes, one of everything, nothing extra or decorative except for a worn leather-bound book on the small table beside his chair. "You live here alone?" she asked. "Yes." "How long?" "3 years." Getting information from him was like pulling teeth, each answer brief and reluctant, but she found herself curious about this quiet man who lived alone in the wilderness. "What do you do?" "Ranch work mostly. Got some cattle, a few horses. Do odd jobs in town when needed." He stood again and moved to the window, pulling back the oilcloth covering to peer out at the storm. "Getting worse. We will be snowed in for a few days at least." The reality of her situation hit her then. Trapped in a one-room cabin with a strange man, unable to leave, completely dependent on his goodwill. But when he turned back to look at her, she saw no threat in those gray-blue eyes, only a careful reserve, as if he was as uncomfortable with her presence as she was uncertain about his. "I do not want to impose on you," she said quietly. "No imposition. Not like I was going anywhere." He moved back to the fire and added another log, sending sparks spiraling up the chimney. "You should rest. Healing takes time." She wanted to ask him more questions, to understand this man who had saved her life, but exhaustion was pulling at her again, dragging her down into darkness. She let her eyes close, the sound of the storm fading into the background, and slept. When she woke again, it was dark outside the windows, and Adam Lawson was cooking something at the stove, his back to her. She watched him for a few minutes, noting the way he moved with quiet confidence, completely at ease in his solitary domain. He must have sensed her watching because he turned suddenly, catching her gaze, and for a moment something passed between them, a connection she could not name. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Better. Warmer." She flexed her fingers experimentally and found they moved more easily, though they still ached. "Thank you for taking care of me." He shrugged as if it was nothing and brought her a plate of beans and cornbread. "Not much variety in the menu out here." "It smells wonderful." And it did, the simple food more appealing than any fancy meal she had eaten in St. Louis. She ate slowly, watching him eat his own meal standing by the stove, and worked up the courage to try again. "Have you always lived alone?" His jaw tightened slightly. "Not always. I am sorry. I do not mean to pry." He was quiet for a long moment, then said, "Had a wife. She died 4 years ago, cholera. I am so sorry." The words felt inadequate, but she meant them with her whole heart. She knew the weight of that kind of loss, the way it changed everything, made the world feel hollow and strange. "That is why you came out here, to get away from the memories." "Partly." He set his empty plate in the wash basin and stared out the window at the swirling snow. "Partly because I did not fit anywhere else anymore. People want you to move on, to forget, to be who you were before. But you cannot. You are different. So I came out here where nobody expects anything." His honesty surprised her, this sudden glimpse past his careful walls. "I understand that," she said softly. "My parents died of typhoid. Everyone in St. Louis kept telling me I was young, I would recover, I should be grateful I survived. But I did not feel grateful. I felt angry and lost and like I did not belong in my own life anymore. He turned to look at her then, really look at her, and she saw recognition in his eyes, the understanding of someone who had walked the same dark paths. "That is why you were coming to Montana, to start over?" "Yes. My cousin wrote that she had work for me, a place to stay. I thought maybe I could build something new here, something that was mine." She smiled sadly, though I did not expect to arrive quite so dramatically. Montana has a way of testing people right from the start. He moved to the fireplace and settled back into his chair, picking up the leather-bound book. "You should rest more. Still got healing to do." But she was not tired anymore, or rather, her mind was too full of questions to let her sleep. "What are you reading?" He held up the book so she could see the worn cover. "Shakespeare, The Tempest. You like Shakespeare?" She could not keep the surprise from her voice. "That's so strange." There was a hint of amusement in his tone, the first she had heard. "No, I suppose I did not expect it." "Because I am a cowboy living in a cabin in the middle of nowhere." Now he was definitely amused. "My mother was a teacher back in Virginia, made sure my brother and I could read before we could hardly walk. Shakespeare, Dickens, Twain, all of it." "Where is your brother now?" The amusement faded from his face. "Dead. Got shot in a card game in Deadwood 5 years ago. I am sorry, you have lost so much." "Most people have out here. That is the nature of the frontier." He opened the book and began to read, clearly done with the conversation. And she lay back against the pillows, listening to the storm rage outside and feeling strangely safe in this small cabin with this quiet, damaged man who reads Shakespeare by firelight. The next 2 days passed in a strange, suspended sort of time. The storm continued to howl outside, piling snow up against the cabin walls until they were buried in a cocoon of white silence broken only by the wind. Adam cared for her with quiet efficiency, helping her walk when her feet could bear weight again, steadying her when she wobbled, always respectful, always careful to give her space. They spoke little, but she found herself watching him constantly, fascinated by his economy of movement, the way he seemed completely self-sufficient, needing nothing and no one. On the 3rd day, the storm finally broke, and she woke to brilliant sunshine streaming through the windows. The world outside transformed into a dazzling white landscape that hurt to look at. Adam was already up, standing at the window with a cup of coffee in his hand, and when he heard her stir, he said without turning, "Storm is over. I will dig us out today, and tomorrow I can take you into town." She should have felt relief, but instead something twisted in her chest, a strange reluctance to leave this place, this man. "That would be very kind of you." He nodded and went outside, and she heard the sound of his shovel scraping against frozen snow. She got up slowly, her body still sore but functional, and looked around the cabin with new eyes. She had been here for 3 days and knew almost nothing about him, this man who had saved her life. What little he had told her only made her want to know more, to understand what had shaped him into this solitary, careful person who kept the world at arm's length. She found her clothes hanging by the fire, cleaned and dried, and dressed quickly, grateful to be out of the too large nightshirt. When she looked out the window, she could see Adam working steadily, his breath rising in clouds of steam, his movements methodical as he carved a path through snow that came up past his knees. She opened the door and called, "Can I help?" He looked up, surprise crossing his face. "You should stay inside, still recovering." "I am fine, and I cannot sit here doing nothing while you work." She found a second shovel leaning against the cabin wall and began to help, though her muscles protested and her hands ached in the cold. They worked in silence for over an hour, carving a path to the small barn where his horses and cattle had weathered the storm, then clearing the area around the cabin. When they finally went back inside, both exhausted and frozen, he made more coffee and they sat by the fire, not speaking. And she realized she was more comfortable in this silence than she had been in months of forced conversation back in St. Louis. There was no pressure here to be anything other than what she was, no expectations to perform happiness or recovery or gratitude. "You are a hard worker," he said finally, surprising her. "My father owned a bakery. I grew up working." She wrapped her hands around the warm cup, savoring the heat. "I am not afraid of hard work. That will serve you well here. Montana does not have much use for delicate flowers." "I am not a delicate flower." He looked at her then, a long measuring look, and nodded slowly. "No, I do not suppose you are." That night she lay in his bed, knowing it was his because where else would he have been sleeping these past 3 nights except on the floor by the fire, and felt guilt wash over her. "Mr. Lawson," she called softly into the darkness. "Yes, you have been sleeping on the floor." "I cannot let you keep doing that. Tomorrow night I will take the floor." "You will not." His voice was firm. "You are still healing." "So are you, I think, just in different ways." Silence. Then, "What do you mean by that?" "I mean you are out here alone, hiding from the world, reading Shakespeare and pretending you do not need anyone. That is its own kind of injury." More silence, longer this time. Then, "Get some sleep, Miss Abbott." She smiled in the darkness, pleased that she had gotten under his skin even just a little. "Zara. Please just call me Zara." "Good night, Zara." "Good night, Adam." The next morning dawned clear and bright, the kind of blue sky perfection that made the blizzard seem like a dream. Adam hitched his wagon and loaded her small trunk, which he had retrieved from the overturned stagecoach along with the driver's body, already frozen solid. They rode in silence toward Miles City, the wagon crunching through snow that sparkled like diamonds in the morning sun, and Zara found herself memorizing everything about him. The way his hands held the reins with casual confidence, the set of his shoulders, the line of his jaw, as if she might never see him again and needed to keep every detail. Miles City was a rough frontier town of wooden buildings and muddy streets, saloons and general stores, and the hopeful optimism of a place still being built. Adam drove straight to the undertaker's office to report the driver's death, then asked for directions to her cousin's store. He found it on the main street, a neat establishment with clean windows and a painted sign reading Fletcher General Store. He helped her down from the wagon and carried her trunk to the door, and for a moment they stood there awkwardly, neither quite knowing what to say. Finally Zara held out her hand and said, "Thank you, Adam Lawson. You saved my life and I will never forget it." He took her hand, his grip warm and strong, and she saw something flicker in those gray-blue eyes, something that looked almost like regret. "You take care of yourself, Zara Abbott." "You too." She wanted to say more, wanted to ask if she would see him again, but the door opened and a plump woman with kind eyes and gray-streaked hair rushed out, crying, "Zara! Oh, thank God, we heard about the stagecoach and feared the worst." Her cousin Margaret swept her into a hug and pulled her inside, chattering about the storm and the house and the room she had prepared. And when Zara looked back, Adam was already climbing back into his wagon. She watched him drive away until he turned a corner and disappeared, and felt an unexpected ache in her chest, as if she had lost something precious before she had even realized she had found it. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity as Zara settled into her new life. Margaret and her husband Thomas were warm and welcoming, giving her a small room above the store and teaching her the business. Miles City was full of rough miners and cowboys and railroad workers, but also families trying to build lives. Women who came into the store to buy fabric and flour and stood talking for hours, starved for female company. Zara threw herself into the work, grateful for the distraction, but found her thoughts returning again and again to that quiet cabin and the man who lived there alone. She asked Margaret about him one evening as they prepared dinner. "You know Adam Lawson? He has a place west of town." "Oh yes, poor man. He comes in once a month or so for supplies, keeps to himself mostly. There was some tragedy in his past, I believe. His wife died and he came out here to ranch alone." Margaret gave her a curious look. "Why do you ask? He found me during the blizzard. Took care of me for 3 days." Zara kept her voice casual. "I just wondered about him. He is a good man from what I hear. Honest, hardworking, just very private. Several ladies in town have tried to catch his attention, but he is not interested." Margaret smiled. "Are you interested, dear?" "No, I owe him my life. I wanted to thank him properly." But it was more than that, and she knew it. In those 3 days in his cabin, she had felt something she could not name, a connection that went deeper than gratitude or curiosity. She found herself looking for him every time she heard horses on the street, scanning faces in the crowd on her rare trips outside, hoping for a glimpse of dark hair and gray-blue eyes. It was almost 3 weeks later when he finally appeared, riding into town on a cold January morning to pick up supplies. Zara was helping a customer when she saw him through the window, tying his horse to the rail outside, and her heart did something foolish in her chest. He came through the door and stopped when he saw her, surprise crossing his face. "Zara, I did not know you worked here. It is my cousin's store." She was acutely aware of Margaret watching from behind the counter, of the customer whose order she was supposed to be filling. "How have you been?" "Fine. You?" "Good. Settling in." This was absurd, standing here making stilted small talk with a man who had seen her at her most vulnerable, who had saved her life and dressed her wounds and let her sleep in his bed. "Your hands healed up." She held them out and he took them without thinking, turning them over to examine her fingers. His touch sent electricity up her arms and she saw his eyes widen slightly, as if he felt it too. He released her hands quickly and stepped back. "That is good. I am glad you are well." He nodded to Margaret. "Mrs. Fletcher, I need to pick up my usual order." "Of course, Mr. Lawson. Zara can help you with that." So she gathered his supplies, intensely aware of him standing close to her in the narrow aisles, smelling of leather and wood smoke and winter air. She wanted to say something meaningful to bridge the awkward distance between them, but every word that came to mind seemed wrong. Finally, as she tallied his order at the counter, she said quietly, "Will you come to town for the dance next week? It is a community gathering. Everyone will be there." He looked at her for a long moment. "I do not dance, neither do I, really, but Margaret says it is important to be part of the community. You could come just to." She trailed off, not wanting to sound desperate. To what? To see people, to not be alone all the time. She met his eyes. "I worry about you out there by yourself." Something shifted in his expression, a crack in his careful walls. "You do not need to worry about me. Maybe not. But I do anyway." He paid for his supplies and loaded them into his saddlebags, and she thought he would leave without another word. But at the door he paused and looked back at her. "Maybe I will come, no promises." She smiled, feeling absurdly pleased. "No promises." He left and Margaret came to stand beside her, watching him ride away. "That man is half in love with you already and does not even know it." "Don't be ridiculous. He barely knows me." Sometimes that is all it takes. One look, one moment, and everything changes. Margaret patted her shoulder. "And you are half in love with him too, dear. I can see it on your face." Zara wanted to deny it but could not find the words. Was it love? This strange ache in her chest, this constant awareness, this feeling that she had left part of herself in that cabin during the storm. She did not know. She only knew that she wanted to see him again, to hear his quiet voice, to watch the way firelight played across his features. The night of the dance arrived cold and clear. The community hall packed with people eager for entertainment after weeks of winter isolation. Zara wore her best dress, a deep blue wool that brought out the color of her eyes, and helped Margaret set out food while Thomas played fiddle with several other men. She tried not to watch the door, tried not to hope, but could not help the disappointment that settled over her as the evening wore on and Adam did not appear. She was helping serve punch when she felt someone watching her, and looked up to find him standing just inside the door, wearing clean clothes and looking deeply uncomfortable in the crowd. Their eyes met across the room and she smiled, feeling her heart lift, and he made his way toward her through the press of bodies. "You came," she said. I said maybe. But there was something warm in his eyes, something that had not been there before. "I keep my maybes. I am glad." She handed him a cup of punch. "Are you sure you do not dance?" "Very sure. But I will watch you dance if you would like." So she danced with Thomas and with several cowboys who asked politely, always aware of Adam standing against the wall, his eyes following her around the room. When she finally escaped her dance partners and went to stand beside him, breathless and flushed, he said quietly, "You look happy." "I am. This is a good town, good people. I think I can build a life here." "That is good. You deserve happiness. So do you." She touched his arm lightly. "Will you walk with me? It is too hot in here." He hesitated, then nodded and followed her outside into the cold night air. The stars overhead were brilliant, undimmed by any city lights, and their breath rose in twin clouds of steam. They walked in silence down the main street, past darkened storefronts, and Zara worked up her courage. "Why did you really come tonight?" she asked. He was quiet for so long she thought he would not answer. Then, "Because you asked me to, because I—" He stopped, shook his head. "I do not know how to do this." "Do what? This? Talk to someone, care about someone. I have been alone for so long I forgot how." He turned to face her, and in the moonlight his face looked younger, more vulnerable. "But these past 3 weeks all I could think about was you. Wondering if you were well, if you were happy, if you ever thought about those days in the cabin. And I realized I was not living out there alone. I was just hiding. You were right about that." Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure he must hear it. "I thought about you too, every day. I kept hoping you would come to town. I wanted to, but I did not know if you would want to see me again or if you were just being polite before." "I am never just polite." She smiled and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "I am direct and honest, and I do not play games. So I will tell you plainly. I would like to see you again, Adam Lawson. Often, if you are willing." He looked down at their joined hands, then back up at her face, and she saw wonder there and fear and hope all mixed together. "I am not an easy man to care about. I have been broken and put back together wrong. I do not talk much, and I like my solitude, and I carry ghosts with me everywhere I go. We all carry ghosts, and I am not looking for easy. I am looking for real." She squeezed his hand. "I felt more like myself in those 3 days in your cabin than I have in months. You did not expect me to be anything other than what I was. That is a rare gift." He lifted his free hand slowly and touched her cheek, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "I have not felt this way since Sarah died. I did not think I could feel this way again. It terrifies me." "Me too." She leaned into his touch, but maybe being terrified together is better than being safe and alone. He smiled then, really smiled, and it transformed his entire face, erasing the hard lines and making him look years younger. "When did you get so wise?" "I have always been wise. You just have not known me long enough to realize it." He laughed, a low, rumbling sound that vibrated through his chest, and pulled her closer. "Would it be appropriate if I kissed you right now?" here on the main street of Miles City, Montana. I do not care if it is appropriate. Do it anyway." So he did, bending his head to capture her lips with his, and it was nothing like the chaste kisses she had received from beaux back in St. Louis. This was fire and hunger and 3 weeks of longing, his arms coming around her to pull her against his solid body, her hands fisting in his shirt. She felt the world spin around them and knew with absolute certainty that this was right, this man, this moment, this frozen street under 1,000 stars. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead against hers and said, "Come out to the cabin this Sunday. Let me cook you dinner, a proper meal, not just soup and beans. I would like that very much." They walked back to the dance hand in hand, and when Margaret saw them, she gave Zara a knowing smile that made her blush. Adam stayed another hour, standing close to her, his hand occasionally finding hers in the crowd, and when he finally left he whispered in her ear, "Sunday. Do not forget." As if she could possibly forget, the week until Sunday seemed to last forever. Zara worked in the store and helped Margaret with household chores and tried not to count the hours, but time had never moved so slowly. She found herself planning what to wear, what to say, imagining 100 different scenarios and feeling foolish for it. She was 22 years old, not some teenage girl with her first crush, but Adam made her feel young and hopeful in a way she had not felt since before her parents died. Margaret loaned her the wagon on Sunday morning with a knowing wink and instructions to be back before dark. Zara drove the 4 miles to Adam's cabin with her heart in her throat, rehearsing conversations in her head, but when she arrived and saw him waiting on the porch, all her careful planning evaporated. He helped her down from the wagon and said, "I am glad you came. I was worried you might change your mind. Not a chance." She looked around the clearing, seeing it properly for the first time in daylight. It was beautiful in its simplicity. The sturdy log cabin with smoke rising from the chimney, the small barn with its split-rail corral, the forest pressing close on all sides. "It is lovely here. It suits me, quiet, away from everything." He took her hand. "Come inside, I actually tried to clean." The cabin looked much as she remembered, but tidier, with fresh flowers in a jar on the table and the smell of roasting meat coming from the oven. He had clearly gone to great effort, and it touched her more than any expensive restaurant back home ever had. "You did not have to go to so much trouble," she said. "I wanted to. I wanted to show you that I can do more than just survive, that I can actually live if I have a reason to." He pulled out the chair for her. "Dinner will be ready in about 20 minutes. Would you like some coffee while we wait?" They sat at his small table and talked, really talked, in a way they had not been able to during the blizzard when she was injured and weak. He told her about his childhood in Virginia, the farm where he had grown up, his mother's love of books and his father's death in the war. He spoke of his wife Sarah, how they had met when they were both 17, married young and full of dreams, come west to build a ranch together. "She was everything to me," he said quietly, staring into his coffee. "When she died, I did not think I could survive it. I wanted to die too. Instead, I came out here and just stopped feeling, stopped wanting, stopped living. I became this half-person going through motions." He looked up at her. "Until you fell through my door in that blizzard. I did not do anything special. I was just trying not to freeze to death. You reminded me what it felt like to care about someone, to worry about another person, to want them to be okay." He reached across the table and took her hand. "You woke me up, Zara. After 4 years of being asleep, you woke me up." She felt tears burning in her eyes. "I understand that. I felt dead too after my parents, like I was just going through the motions of being alive but not actually living. But here, with you, I feel real again." They ate dinner at the small table, the food simple but good, and talked for hours about everything and nothing. She told him about her father's bakery, the way bread dough felt under her hands, her mother's laugh and her father's terrible jokes. He told her about breaking horses and the first winter alone in the cabin when he thought the loneliness might kill him. They talked until the sun set and the cabin grew dark except for firelight, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world when he pulled her into his lap and kissed her again, slower this time, deeper, with a tenderness that made her heart ache. "I am falling for you," he whispered against her lips. "I do not know how to stop it, and I do not want to try." "Then do not stop. Fall with me." She kissed him again. "We can figure out the rest as we go." She stayed until full dark, until Margaret would start to worry, and when he walked her out to the wagon he held her for a long moment, his arms strong around her, his face buried in her hair. "Come back next Sunday, and the Sunday after that. Come back as often as you want. This cabin is not the same without you in it. I will come back every Sunday if you want me to. I want you to, more than I have wanted anything in a very long time." The weeks that followed fell into a pattern that felt like coming home. Zara worked in the store during the week and spent every Sunday at the cabin with Adam, cooking together, talking, taking long walks through the snow-covered forest. He taught her to ride his horses, and she taught him to bake bread, laughing when his first loaf came out hard as a rock. They talked about their pasts and their dreams and their fears, peeling back layers until they knew each other in a way that went beyond surface attraction. In March, when the snow began to melt and early wildflowers pushed up through the mud, Adam came to town on a weekday for the first time. He found Zara in the store and asked Thomas for permission to take her for a walk, formal and nervous in a way that made her smile. They walked to the edge of town where the prairie opened up before them, endless and golden in the afternoon sun. "I have been thinking," Adam said, his hand tight around hers, "about the future, about what I want my life to look like. And what do you want?" Her heart was pounding. "I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to build a real ranch, not just a place to hide. I want to have children someday, a family, a life that matters." He stopped walking and turned to face her, both her hands in his. "I want all of that with you, Zara, if you will have me. Are you asking me to marry you?" "Yes." "I know it is fast. We have only known each other a few months, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life." His eyes were fierce and bright. "You are the other half of me. The part I did not know was missing. I love you more than I thought I could ever love anyone again." Tears spilled down her cheeks and she laughed through them. "Yes. Yes, of course, yes. I love you too, Adam. I think I have loved you since that first night in the cabin when you saved my life and gave me your bed and read Shakespeare by firelight." He picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing like children, and when he set her down he kissed her so hard she forgot to breathe. "I do not have a ring yet," he said. "I will get one, I promise. I do not need a ring, I just need you." They were married 6 weeks later in the small church in Miles City, with Margaret and Thomas and half the town in attendance. Zara wore a simple white dress that Margaret helped her sew, and Adam wore a new suit that made him look uncomfortable but handsome. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife and Adam kissed her in front of everyone, she felt her whole life clicking into place, all the broken pieces finally coming together to make something beautiful. They spent their wedding night in the cabin, finally alone together as man and wife, and it was awkward and sweet and perfect in equal measure. Adam was gentle with her, patient and tender, and when they lay tangled together afterward in the narrow bed, he whispered, "I never thought I would have this again. A wife, a partner, someone to build a life with. You have given me everything. You have given me just as much. A home, a purpose, a reason to keep going. She traced patterns on his chest with her finger. "We found each other in that blizzard, and I do not think it was an accident. I think we were meant to weather that storm together so we could find our way here." "A winter storm brought us together," he agreed. "Seems fitting for Montana." The first year of their marriage was not easy. The ranch demanded constant work, the weather was unpredictable, money was tight. But they faced every challenge together, working side by side from dawn until dark, building something real and lasting. Zara learned to help with the cattle and horses, discovering she had a talent for healing sick animals. Adam expanded the cabin, adding a proper bedroom and a larger kitchen, determined to make it a real home for her. On cold winter nights, they sat by the fire and read to each other, Shakespeare and Dickens and whatever books they could borrow from the lending library in town. In spring, they planted a garden and she taught him which herbs could be used for cooking and medicine. In summer, they worked until they were exhausted, then made love under the stars while coyotes sang in the distance. In fall, they prepared for winter, salting meat and canning vegetables and cutting firewood, racing the season through it all. Adam slowly transformed from the quiet, isolated man she had first met into someone more open, more present in the world. He smiled more, laughed more, started going to town events and helping neighbors when they needed it. He was never chatty or overly social, that was not his nature, but he was no longer hiding from life. "You changed me," he told her one night as they lay in bed, his hand resting on her stomach where their first child was just beginning to grow. "Made me want to live again instead of just existing. You changed me too, gave me a place to belong, a person to belong to." She turned to face him in the darkness. "I was so lost when I came here, and then that storm hit and everything changed." "Best storm of my life," he said, and kissed her softly. Their son was born in December, almost exactly a year after the blizzard that had brought them together. Labor was long and difficult, attended by Margaret and the town doctor, and Adam paced the cabin like a caged animal until he heard the baby's first cry. When the doctor finally let him in, he found Zara exhausted but glowing, holding a red-faced infant with a surprising amount of dark hair. "It is a boy," she said, smiling up at him. "A healthy, loud boy." He sat carefully on the edge of the bed and looked down at his son with wonder. "He is perfect. You are amazing. I cannot believe you did that. We did it, together." She adjusted the blanket around the baby. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names but never settled on one, waiting until they saw the baby to decide. Adam studied his son's face, the tiny fingers that curled around his own large one, and said, "What about Andrew? Andrew Thomas Lawson, after both our fathers." "Andrew Thomas Lawson." She tested it out and smiled. "I love it. Hello, Andrew. Welcome to Montana." The next 2 years passed in a blur of sleepless nights and early mornings, of watching Andrew grow from a helpless infant into a curious toddler who got into everything. The ranch prospered, Adam's hard work and careful management paying off as their herd grew, and they were able to hire occasional help. Zara took on more responsibility, managing the books and handling sales, discovering she had her father's head for business. They added onto the cabin again, building a second bedroom for Andrew and a proper parlor, where Zara could entertain the women from town who had become her friends. Life was full and busy and occasionally exhausting, but it was theirs, built together from nothing through sheer determination and love. On a cold November evening when Andrew was 2.5, Zara stood at the stove making dinner while Adam read their son a story by the fire. She watched them together, the quiet cowboy who had saved her life now calmly explaining a picture book to a restless toddler, and felt her heart swell with love so intense it almost hurt. Adam looked up and caught her watching and smiled. What are you thinking about? How far we have come. How different my life is from what I imagined when I left St. Louis. She came to sit beside them on the floor. I thought I was going to work in a store and live a quiet, small life. Instead, I got all this. You regret it? He asked it lightly, but she heard the thread of uncertainty beneath. Not for a single second. This is everything I never knew I wanted. She leaned against his shoulder. You are everything I never knew I needed. He wrapped his free arm around her, Andrew crawling into her lap, and they sat together in the firelight, a family, complete and whole. Outside, the wind was beginning to pick up, the first hints of winter in the air, and Zara thought about that blizzard 3 years ago. How it had seemed like the end of everything, but had actually been the beginning. Do you remember what you said to me, she asked quietly, that first night in the cabin, when I asked why you lived alone? I said I came out here because I did not fit anywhere else anymore. You still feel that way? He was quiet for a moment, then said, No. I fit here with you and Andrew. This is where I am supposed to be. You made me whole again, Zara. I was incomplete without you, even though I did not know it at the time. She turned to kiss him, Andrew protesting at being squished between them, and whispered, I was incomplete without you too. We were two broken pieces that found each other in the storm and made something beautiful together. The quiet cowboy and the girl from St. Louis who would not give up on him. That is not how I would tell the story. I would say the winter storm brought them together, and the quiet cowboy finally said, I have been incomplete without you, and they lived happily ever after. That is a better version, he agreed. Though I am not sure cowboys are supposed to have fairy tale endings. This one does. She stood up, pulling Andrew with her. Now come eat dinner before it gets cold, and then maybe we can put this little one to bed early and have some time to ourselves. I like the way you think, Mrs. Lawson. They ate together at the table Adam had built with his own hands. In the cabin they had expanded together, with their son chattering about his day in the nonsensical way of toddlers. Later, after Andrew was asleep, they sat on the porch wrapped in blankets and watched snow begin to fall, the first real snow of the season. And Zara thought about how storms could destroy, but they could also bring unexpected gifts. The years continued to unfold, each one bringing new challenges and joys. Their daughter Emma was born when Andrew was 4, a quiet baby with her father's gray-blue eyes and her mother's dark hair. 2 years after that came another son, James, who was loud and boisterous from the moment he entered the world. The cabin expanded again and again, eventually becoming a proper ranch house with multiple bedrooms and a real parlor and a kitchen big enough to cook for their growing family. Adam hired more help as the ranch grew, teaching young cowboys the skills he had learned, and Zara started a small business selling preserves and baked goods to the stores in Miles City. They were not wealthy by any means, but they were comfortable, secure, part of a community they had helped build. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Adam surprised her with a trip to Helena for a week, leaving the children with Margaret and Thomas. It was the first time they had been alone together for more than a few hours since Andrew was born, and it felt like a second honeymoon, wandering the larger city, eating in restaurants, staying in a real hotel with a proper bed. On their last night, lying in that hotel bed with the sounds of the city filtering through the windows, Adam pulled her close and said, Do you ever wish for a different life? Something easier, more comfortable? A city where you could have fine things and not work so hard? Never. She did not even have to think about it. This is the life I chose, and I would choose it again 1,000 times over. You are the life I chose, Adam Lawson, and everything that came with you. I am a lucky man. He kissed her temple. Luckiest man alive to have you. We are both lucky. To have found each other, to have survived that storm, to have built all of this. She turned in his arms to face him. Do you remember what you told me once? That you had been broken and put back together wrong. I remember. You were not put back together wrong. You were put back together exactly right. You just needed someone to see it. He did not answer with words, just pulled her closer and held her like she was the most precious thing in the world, and she felt the truth of their love in every heartbeat, every breath. They returned to the ranch to find everything running smoothly, their children healthy and happy, and slipped back into the rhythm of their life. Andrew was growing tall and serious, following his father around the ranch and learning everything he could about ranching. Emma was gentle and artistic, always drawing or making things with her hands. James was pure mischief, constantly getting into trouble and charming his way out of it. When Andrew turned 16, Adam started teaching him the business side of ranching, preparing to eventually pass it down. This land will be yours someday, he told his son. Yours and your brothers and sisters. It is your legacy, built from nothing through hard work and determination. How did you do it, Pa? Andrew asked. Build all this by yourself? I did not do it by myself. Your mother and I did it together. Adam looked across the pasture to where Zara was hanging laundry, Emma helping her. She saved my life, you know. Long before you were born, I was lost and alone and barely alive, just going through the motions. Then a winter storm brought her to my door and everything changed. That is romantic, Emma said, having wandered over to listen. Like a story from a book. It is a story from a book, Zara said, joining them with her empty laundry basket. It is our story, and it is the best one I know. Adam put his arm around her and pulled her close. Best one I know, too. As the children grew and eventually started their own lives, as the ranch continued to prosper and grow, as Montana Territory became Montana State and Miles City expanded from a rough frontier town into a real city, Adam and Zara remained at the center of it all, the quiet cowboy and the woman from St. Louis who had found each other in a blizzard and built a life that mattered. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party that seemed to include half the county. People came from miles around to celebrate, sharing stories of how Adam and Zara had helped them over the years, the kindness they had shown, the community they had built. Adam was clearly uncomfortable with all the attention, but Zara could see the pride in his eyes, the satisfaction of a life well lived. Late in the evening, when most of the guests had gone home and only family remained, Adam stood up and cleared his throat awkwardly. I am not good at speeches, he began, and everyone laughed because this was well known. But I want to say something while I have you all here. He reached for Zara's hand and pulled her to stand beside him. 25 years ago, a winter storm brought this woman into my life. I was alone and broken and sure I would spend the rest of my days hiding from the world. But she saw something in me worth saving, worth fighting for, and she refused to let me waste away in that cabin. His voice roughened with emotion, and Zara squeezed his hand, her own eyes filling with tears. She made me want to live again, made me believe I could have a future, a family, a life that mattered. Everything you see here, everything we built, started with that storm and her stubborn refusal to let me give up on myself. He turned to face her fully, both her hands in his now, his gray-blue eyes bright with unshed tears. I have been incomplete without you, Zara. From the moment that storm ended and you left my cabin, I was incomplete. And every day since you agreed to marry me has been the gift I never thought I deserved. You are my heart, my home, my everything. Oh, Adam. The tears were streaming down her face now. You are my everything too. My home, my heart, my reason for getting up every morning. I love you more now than I did 25 years ago, which I did not think was possible. He kissed her while their children cheered and whistled, and she tasted salt from both their tears, feeling the weight of 25 years of love and partnership and shared dreams. When they finally broke apart, Andrew was wiping his own eyes and Emma was crying openly, and even mischievous James looked moved. "To Ma and Pa," Andrew said, raising his glass. "The best parents anyone could ask for and proof that true love exists." "To Ma and Pa," everyone echoed, and Zara leaned into Adam's solid warmth and thanked whatever twist of fate had sent that blizzard, had broken her stagecoach wheel, had led her to that cabin and the quiet man who would become her whole world. The years continued their steady march. They welcomed grandchildren, Andrew marrying a sweet girl from town and Emma finding love with a young teacher who moved to Miles City from back east. Even James eventually settled down with a spirited woman who matched his energy and kept him in line. The ranch house filled with noise and laughter when the grandchildren visited, and Adam and Zara found themselves in the unexpected role of elders, dispensing advice and wisdom earned through years of hard living. Adam's hair went gray at the temples and then fully white, his face weathered into deep lines that Zara thought made him more handsome, not less. Her own dark hair streaked with silver, and her hands developed arthritis that made delicate work difficult. But she remained strong and active, refusing to slow down. They took to sitting on the porch in the evenings, watching the sun set over the mountains, holding hands and talking about everything and nothing. Sometimes Andrew or one of the other children would join them, but often it was just the two of them, content in the comfortable silence of a long marriage. "You ever think about that stagecoach driver?" Zara asked one evening. "The one who died in the storm?" "Sometimes. He got you here in a way. If the coach had not crashed, if he had not died, you would have made it to town safely and we might never have met." "That is a terrible thought," she shuddered. "I hate that his death was necessary for my happiness. Life is like that sometimes. Tragedy and joy all mixed together, impossible to separate." He squeezed her hand. "All we can do is honor the gifts we are given and try to live well." "We have lived well," she said firmly. "Very well indeed." When Adam turned 65, Andrew and James began pressing him to retire, to let them take over the ranch completely so he could rest. Adam resisted at first, unable to imagine a life without daily work, but eventually Zara convinced him. "We have earned a little peace," she told him. "Time to just enjoy each other, enjoy our grandchildren, enjoy what we built without constantly working to maintain it." So they stepped back, moving into a smaller house that Andrew had built for them on the edge of the ranch property, with a wide porch and a view of the mountains. It felt strange at first, being idle, but they quickly found a new rhythm. They read more, traveled occasionally to visit friends, spent long hours with their grandchildren teaching them to ride and bake and read Shakespeare by firelight. On a cold December evening, 35 years after that first blizzard, another storm rolled in across the Montana plains. Zara and Adam sat on their porch wrapped in blankets, watching the snow fall, and she said, "Remember the last time it snowed like this? Really snowed, I mean." "The blizzard that brought you to me," he smiled. "How could I forget? Best thing that ever happened to me. Best thing that ever happened to both of us." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I am grateful for that storm every single day. Grateful it brought me to your door, grateful you opened it, grateful you saw past your own pain to save a stranger. You were never just a stranger. From the moment I saw you, half frozen and stubborn and refusing to give up, I knew you were something special. The quiet cowboy who did not know how to talk to people, finding the words when it mattered." She smiled. "You have always been good with words when they counted, Adam. You just do not waste them on small talk. No point in talking unless you have something worth saying. They sat in comfortable silence as the storm built, snow swirling thick and fast, and Zara thought about all the storms they had weathered together over the years. Financial troubles and sick children and hard winters, and all the thousand small disasters of life on a ranch. They had faced everything together, never wavering, always united. "Adam," she said quietly. "Yes, love. Thank you for opening your door that night. Thank you for saving me." He turned to look at her, his gray-blue eyes still bright despite the wrinkles around them. "Thank you for refusing to let me stay lost in my grief. Thank you for seeing the man I could be instead of the broken thing I was. You were never broken, just wounded. There is a difference." She reached up to touch his weathered face. "And I have loved every version of you I have known, from that first quiet cowboy to the man you are now. I love you, Zara Abbott Lawson, more than I have words to say." "I know," she kissed him softly. "And I love you too, always have, always will." They went inside as the storm intensified, the wind howling around their snug little house, and made hot chocolate like they used to do when the children were small. They sat by the fire and read to each other, Shakespeare's words beautiful and familiar, and when they went to bed that night they held each other close and listened to the storm rage outside. "Another winter storm," Adam murmured into her hair, "just like the one that started everything." "Fitting," she agreed. "We began with a storm and we will probably end with one. Montana winters do not change, neither do we, not in the ways that matter." He kissed her forehead. "Sleep well, my heart. You too, I love you more." "Impossible," she whispered, already drifting toward sleep. "I love you most." The storm blew itself out by morning, leaving the world transformed into a glittering white wonderland. Adam and Zara woke tangled together as they had been for 35 years, and watched the sunrise paint the snow pink and gold. Their children and grandchildren would arrive later to check on them, worried about the elderly couple in the storm. But for now it was just the two of them, the quiet cowboy and his stubborn, wonderful wife, safe and warm and completely in love. Andrew arrived first, as he always did, stomping snow off his boots and calling out, "Ma, Pa, you two all right?" "We are fine," Zara called back. "Better than fine. Come have some coffee." He joined them in the kitchen, accepting a mug gratefully. "That was some storm. Reminded me of the stories you used to tell about the blizzard when you met." "Not quite that bad," Adam said. "That storm was something else entirely, worst I have ever seen. And the best," Zara added, "because it brought us together." Andrew smiled at them, his parents still holding hands across the table after all these years, still clearly devoted to each other. "You two are going to live forever, aren't you? Too stubborn to do anything else." "That is the plan," Adam said dryly. "Your mother would not allow me to die. Says she still has too much use for me." "Someone has to reach the high shelves," Zara said primly, and they all laughed. The rest of the family arrived throughout the morning. Emma with her 3 children, James with his wife and 2 rowdy sons. The small house filled with noise and warmth, and the chaos of a large, loving family. Zara made her famous cinnamon rolls, and Adam told stories about ranching in the old days, when Miles City was still rough and wild. Later, when everyone had gone home and silence settled over the house again, Adam and Zara returned to their spot on the porch. The sun was setting, painting the snow-covered mountains in shades of purple and gold, and Zara thought she had never seen anything more beautiful. "This is what we built," she said softly. "Not just the ranch or this house, but this whole family, this whole life. From nothing but a winter storm and 2 broken people who found each other." "Best thing I ever built," Adam agreed. "Better than any barn or fence or house." This family, this love, this life with you. The quiet cowboy finally learning to use his words. She smiled at him. Took you long enough. Some things are worth waiting for, worth finding the right words for. He pulled her close. I have been incomplete without you, Zara. That is the truest thing I have ever said. Before you, I was only half a person going through motions. You made me whole. We made each other whole. Two incomplete people becoming something complete together. She rested her head against his chest, listening to his steady heartbeat. That is what love is, I think. Not finding someone perfect, but finding someone whose brokenness fits with yours, whose scars match up with yours, so you can heal together. Poetic. You should write that down. Maybe I will. Our story should be written down, passed down to the grandchildren so they know where they came from. The winter storm that brought us together, Adam mused. The quiet cowboy who finally learned to speak his heart. The woman from St. Louis who refused to give up on either of us. That is a good story. It is the best story because it is true. They sat together as the sun sank below the mountains and stars began to emerge in the darkening sky. The same stars that had shone on that first night 35 years ago when a half-frozen woman had fallen through a lonely man's door and changed both their lives forever. They had built something remarkable from that chance meeting, that twist of fate, that winter storm that might have killed her but instead gave her everything. The wind picked up again, carrying the promise of more snow, but Zara was not afraid. She had weathered storms before, would weather more before her life was done, but always with this man beside her, this quiet cowboy who had saved her life and then given her a reason to live it fully. They were complete together, two halves of a whole, and nothing, not time or hardship or the harsh Montana winters, could ever change that fundamental truth. I love you, she whispered into the gathering dark. I love you too, he whispered back. Today, tomorrow, and every day after. For as long as we have. Forever then. Forever, he agreed and kissed her softly as the first snowflakes began to fall.